Before I start, let me introduce myself. My name is Calvin Monroe, and I am 52 years old. I am a professor of American history and a doctor of philosophy, which some people believe is a significant title. Despite my colleagues' insistence that I see the world in sharp, unyielding contrasts, I have recently noticed that my inner convictions are disintegrating like fragile old pages in a book that has been forgotten. Despite years of studying the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, nothing could have prepared me for how my own life would fall apart. My personal life has been in disarray lately, and I'm left thinking if I'm certain I'm correct, but everyone else isn't. Does that belief really mean anything? My once unwavering moral compass is now spinning out of control in a whirlwind of heartbreak and betrayal. My heart tightened like a noose around my neck as I heard my daughter, Ava, say that quitting my 20-year marriage to Marina was a mistake. Although Ava's plea was full of innocent perplexity, I could only see the betrayal that had gradually poisoned our family. Marina, my wife since I was barely out of my youth, had become a figure of broken promises and broken trust in my eyes. Logan fell into the chair across from me after our customary embrace, which felt more like a ritual of predetermined outcomes than true warmth, and his eyes revealed an agony I was all too familiar with. "Dad, why are you destroying our family?" With his voice breaking like brittle glass beneath the weight of unspoken realities, he inquired. My words, laden with a bitterness that only years of repressed suffering can produce, hung between us like an inevitable verdict as I attempted to explain. "I can't trust her, Logan. I can't live a single day with someone who has betrayed our sacred vows." The response burned in my throat. As I described the years of deceit that had brought me to this point, how Marina, the woman I once loved, had become trapped in a web of lies and infidelity, each untruth tearing apart the very fabric of our family, Logan's confusion only grew. I remembered how Marina's betrayal was not a one-time mistake, but rather a methodical breakdown of trust, with each lie overlapping like wounds on a wounded soul. It wasn't just the betrayal on the surface, it was the layers upon layers of dishonesty that threatened to devour everything I had once valued. I recall believing that forgiveness may be possible if there was even a glimmer of truth behind her lies, but each lie that was discovered simply served to fan the flames of my raging rage and despair. The more I discovered, the less I could support a woman who had not only made fun of our wedding vows, but also, with each deliberate action, destroyed the concept of fidelity itself. I used to think that love and trust could overcome everything, but the constant pain of Marina's betrayals made me face the harsh truth that love is only a hollow promise without trust. Logan's eyes looked into mine that day, searching for a spark of assurance that had vanished, and I realized that I had gone too far. I made the tragic choice to cut the connections that held me to Marina in the peaceful seclusion of my study, surrounded by the dusty artifacts of my academic successes and emotional setbacks. Now tainted by the bitter taste of treachery, every memory, every shared moment of agony and laughter, and in that heavy quiet, I could almost hear my own voice asking whether I had turned into the very monster I once hated. For what seemed like an eternity, I sat there struggling with the intense feelings that swept through me, a tumultuous mixture of righteous rage, deep despair, and a resolute determination to never be duped again. I had no idea that the storm that had been building inside of me was only getting started, and as I readied myself to face the unpleasant realities of my history, I braced myself for the next chapters of a life that had devolved into an unending, Reddit-worthy tale of drama, treachery, and heartbreak. Knowing full well that the road ahead was paved with the remains of a family that could never be whole again, I made the first step towards a future where trust, once taken for granted, would have to be won again, albeit with a heavy heart and a mind full of memories of broken promises. Stay tuned for part 2 as the full scope of Marina's betrayal starts to emerge and the past crashes into the present. After that devastating day, I had to piece together the pieces of Marina's betrayal, with each piece of information appearing like a sinister prophecy in the stillness of the night. I started by thinking back to the seemingly innocent outings Marina and her sister Fiona would take while pretending to be on routine business at her family's home improvement store, which I now remember as Williams and Company. but each outing felt more like a secret meeting than an errand. The receipts were a quiet testament to a reoccurring trend that tormented my conscience as I soon realized that the automobile she drove always filled up at the same gas station. With his steely eyes and unyielding drive, my father Victor, a former firefighter who is now a persistent detective in his own way, took it upon himself to keep track of these facts, reminding me that even in the darkest moments, there is light shining through the gaps. The turning point was when the receipts brought him to a nearby medical facility where rumors of secrets and unspoken realities gathered. Soon after, I discovered that Marina had made multiple visits to that clinic, each one cloaked in secrecy and oblique connotations. During one of those covert trips, I learned with increasing, intolerable horror that Marina had had an abortion without my knowledge. This information struck me with a ruthless, unforgiving rage. A young salesperson named Dylan, who was 7 years my wife's junior, came to light as I combed through the growing body of evidence. His presence in Marina's life was as unwanted as a splinter stuck in my heart. Dylan, whose quick looks and hushed vows were caught on camera in blurry pictures and overheard talks, came to represent all the lies that had been stitched into the fabric of our failing marriage. I still clearly remember going to a family wedding, a forced celebration of normalcy, where, amid the courteous laughter of distant relatives and the clinking of glasses, I happened to run across Jack, Fiona's brother-in-law, whose casual comment about construction projects chilled me to my core. The well-prepared facade started to fall apart even more when he said something casual that went against the perfectly polished tales Marina had been feeding me for years. Every contradiction and lapse in her story brought home the harsh truth. Marina's entire world was based on dishonesty, and I was left to pick up the broken pieces of honor and trust. Late at night, I sat by myself in my study, which used to be a haven for my academic endeavors but is now a confessional for my darkest wounds. I meticulously relived every moment, each memory piercing my already shattered psyche like a knife. The person I thought I knew had turned into a stranger caught in a maze of falsehoods, and the sound of Marina's voice, which had once been comforting and familiar, now sounded hollow in my ears, each syllable a stinging reminder of the promises she had broken. I couldn't believe that the lady I had loved for 20 years could so nonchalantly ruin the life we had created together. My heart was heavy with grief and roiling with rage. A note from Marina, written with a chilly finality that left no possibility for reconciliation, was a thin piece of paper that stealthily slid under my study door during these torturous hours. With shaky hands, I prepared the divorce papers, a gesture that felt like both an end and a somber new beginning. That note, filled with uncompromising words and an unwillingness to repair what had been permanently damaged, reinforced my choice. As I handed over the paperwork, I felt the weight of our shared past shatter into dust, leaving behind nothing but the bitter residue of remorse and treachery. The process was as brutal as it was unavoidable. However, the emotional storm was not limited to just my own emotions, since I could see the anguish and confusion in Ava and Logan's eyes, and their naive voices reflected the chaos that now characterized our family. Their inquiries, which were motivated by a basic need for security, were answered with information I wished I could keep hidden since it was too painful for their impressionable brains to process, but too important for them to learn in the long run. The choice felt as burdensome as the chains of fate itself, and I battled the guilt of having to choose between my own need for truth and the delicate delicacy of my children's reality. I sat down with Marina in the antiseptic counselor's office, a little space where whispered confessions were supposed to open the door to recovery. The quiet between us was louder than any dispute we had ever had. Her eyes, filled with floods of grief and defiance, attempted to express a remorse that I wasn't sure was sincere, but my entire soul cried out that our trust had been broken forever. The counselor tried to heal the rift between us, but the words that were exchanged were as fragile and shattered as the promises of our past. She was a cool-headed woman with a quiet authority. The room seemed to contract around us as I described my own suffering, stifling in the intensity of our shared anguish. I listened to Marina mutter excuses and apologies, but none of them were able to conceal the stark, unvarnished reality of her infidelity. I couldn't help but wonder whether there was ever a hope for redemption in a life so completely tainted by betrayal. Even as the sessions went on and each encounter left me feeling more exhausted and disillusioned than the one before, every fresh piece of the puzzle strengthened my conviction that Marina had chosen deceit over the integrity of our vows, and the proof was indisputable. I took comfort in my father's painstaking work, whose unwavering search for the truth gave me some control over a situation that had gotten out of control. Every hushed tip from an unidentified source and every late-night phone call confirmed the heartbreaking reality that our previous love had been irreparably tainted. The emotional storm that is raging inside of me as I sit here now is a flood of grief, rage, and a resolute will to restore what little dignity I still have. I find it difficult to reconcile the woman I fell in love with and the stranger who destroyed our life, and I am plagued by the memory of Marina's kind smile, which is now a mask hiding the betrayal underneath. Every day is a struggle against the demons of uncertainty and sorrow, yet despite the wounds of this betrayal being carved into my spirit, I am driven to create a future in which integrity and trust may one day flourish once more. The voyage is far from finished, and as I continue to explore this maze of suffering and revelation, I find myself questioning whether the scars from the past will ever stop bleeding. Follow along as the following chapter takes place, where the cruel reality of reconstructing a life from the ashes and the terrible repercussions of betrayal clash as the ghosts of broken trust haunt every move I make. The weight of our broken history was like a never-ending storm as I woke up one gloomy morning. It was too quiet in the home, and every sound I made seemed to evoke memories of Marina's laughter and our shared dreams, which had been twisted into a painful reminder of everything that had been lost. I came upon an old photo of Marina and a young man, arms wrapped around one another, smiling with a purity that now stung my heart like acid as I was going through a forgotten drawer. Even though it had faded over time, that picture was evidence of a history I could no longer ignore, a past in which every lie and covert meeting coiled around me like a snake poised to attack. With the snapshot shaking in my hands and my mind racing with grief, rage, and a desperate search for the truth, I spent hours in the faint light of my study lamp. I scheduled another session with our counselor because I was determined to face the ghost of what used to be. The room felt like the arena where our broken promises would face off one last time. It was familiar but also tense. Marina came in with eyes full of defiance and grief, which made my heart hurt and my blood boil. "I never meant to hurt you, Calvin," she whispered, her voice gentle but heavy with remorse. "I thought that we still had a chance to be pardoned." Her remarks, which were intended to be healing, simply made my feelings of betrayal worse. "Pardon?" I snapped back, my voice breaking from the stress of all the years of lying. "Every promise we made and every hope we had was destroyed by you. How can we possibly have a chance?" As our words, raw and bitter, filled the void between us like broken glass, each syllable a reminder of broken promises and violated trust, the counselor's soft interjections were ignored. Following that session, I strolled through our former neighborhood's deserted streets, each step bearing the echoes of a life that had once been full of life, but was now reduced to bits of suffering. In contrast to the chaos inside my psyche, the city around me moved in a blur, with the uncaring hum of traffic and the hushed laughter of strangers. Even though I held frantically to recollections of better times, I felt as though the cosmos was whispering secrets of regret and asking me to let go in the cool embrace of a stinging wind. I was aware of the times when Marina's touch had felt secure and warm at every turn and in every quiet alleyway. These memories were now distorted into spectral representations of dishonesty. That evening, in the seclusion of my small new house, I sat at my desk, a holdover from a previous existence that now acts as a confessional for my deepest thoughts. I poured my pain onto paper in the faint light, letting go of the anger and sadness that had been inside of me for so long with each syllable. Every phrase I wrote was a battle cry against the demons of my past, contrasting the agonizing reality of Marina's betrayals with days full of laughter and nights full of dreams. Reluctantly, I realized during these times of solitude that healing would come from embracing a future free from the shackles of unfulfilled promises, rather than from holding onto the remnants of our shared past. However, it was more difficult to exorcise the demons of the past. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marina's and Dylan's blurry faces, their smiles a sharp contrast to the painful reality I now had to confront. Our children's recollections, including Ava's naive inquiries and Logan's mute, hurt looks, tormented me and served as a terrible reminder that the wounds of treachery went well beyond my own broken heart. I plucked up the nerve to sit down with them one cold evening. I attempted to explain over a simple supper that sometimes love may take a terrible turn and that once trust is shattered, it leaves scars that time may never completely remove. The wind outside howled like a wailing spirit. In that vulnerable conversation, I witnessed the unadulterated impact of a world completely upended as their wide, inquisitive eyes pleaded for answers I wasn't sure I could provide. The sad reality that our family had been ripped apart, piece by delicate piece, was revealed to them in silence when I told them stories of bright afternoons and starry promises of life that now lived only in a haze of what might have been. I wondered if the man I used to be could ever be found again as I lay in bed that night, the sound of Marina's laughing fading into a hazy image in my head. I pondered whether I was also doomed to fade into a shadow of my former self, much like the fall leaves that are carried away by the unrelenting wind. Sleep arrived as a restless companion rather than a balm, bringing with it the sting of remorse and the unrelenting pain of betrayal into my dreams. But with every sunrise came a glimmer of hope, a tenacious ember that suggested that maybe one day I could rebuild from the ashes. That in spite of the unhealed, raw wounds, there was a future in which the lessons learned from yesterday's scars may be a tribute to the strength that comes from enduring life's most trying times. As the days gradually stretched into weeks, I started the difficult process of self-reclamation, which required me to face each upsetting memory head-on. I went back to previous haunts and read the letters from a different time period in an attempt to put my life's mosaic back together, which Marina's dishonesty had now broken. During quiet times of introspection, I came to terms with the fact that although the wounds could never completely go away, they might become reminders of what I had survived. Even if every step I took ahead was filled with sadness, I had a strong will to restore not just the dignity I had lost, but also to create a future in which trust, no matter how brittle, could be fostered once more. Even when the ghosts of treachery sounded misgivings in every peaceful corner of my mind, I clung to that hope like a lone traveler in a vast, merciless desert, determined to construct a route. As I stand at the intersection of the past and the future, I see that every broken promise and heartache has permanently altered my soul. But beneath those wounds is the tale of a man who, in spite of the constant pull of despair, dared to hope for a new beginning and refused to let his losses define him. I'm gradually and painfully realizing that the route to salvation is a convoluted one that winds through both brightness and darkness. And while I prepare for the difficulties that lie ahead, I am aware that the path to recovery is lined with the remains of a life that was once lived, a life that was characterized by love, treachery, and, in the end, the unwavering courage to get back up. Join me as I continue this trip in part 4, where the potential of a future free from the ghosts of the past is ignited by the embers of a once shattered trust, and where retribution and redemption start to entwine. The days that followed were filled with an unrelenting rage, a fierce need for atonement and redemption that consumed me like a flame. The hurt of Marina's treachery had made me want to regain my honor, so I stopped wallowing in the quiet pain of loss and started to plan a strategy that would expose the truth and make the people who had harmed me face the repercussions of their actions. It began with the methodical and silent collection of every scrap of evidence and every rumored detail that may be used as a weapon against the dishonesty that had destroyed our lives. Ever the unwavering guardian, my father persisted in his clandestine research, turning into a shadow in the night and obtaining secrets with an accuracy that both amazed and alarmed me. In the seclusion of my small study, late one muggy evening, while the sky bled the hues of a departing sun, I sat thinking, my mind a whirlpool of memories and plans. The goal was clear, a public revelation of Marina's secret life, a reckoning that would reveal all of the lies she had told, and, in doing so, provide some justice to the broken family that still held onto the shards of what was. I thought back to the times Marina had told me stories of her innocence, her words as sweet and soothing as a lullaby, but there was a cold calculation behind them that now made me feel quite uncomfortable. Every sly look and every hushed exchange with Dylan and his cronies served as fuel for a war I had fought for far too long in secret. At that point, I made the decision to seek the assistance of a local journalist, a gritty storyteller who enjoys exposing the murky side of suburban life. After years of exposing deceit and treachery, his eyes hardened and met mine with a promise of truth. Together, we started to dismantle Marina's meticulously crafted facade. We collected documents, images, and even secret recordings that encapsulated the truths that had so brutally devastated our relationship. Each item was evidence of a promise broken and a trust abused. Every aspect and every interaction was meticulously documented in the hopes that the chilly daylight would expose Marina's dishonesty. During this process of seeking validation, I had an intriguing metamorphosis that strengthened my commitment and ignited a fire within me. My once consuming rage started to take on a purpose, a search for atonement that was as much about healing as it was about exacting revenge. I came to see that the process of regaining my honor involved more than just dismantling the lies of the past. It also involved creating something new out of the rubble, a future in which the ghosts of the past would finally be buried and trust, however brittle, could be restored on the basis of truth. However, I could sense the weight of an impending clash as I dug deeper into this risky game of exposure and retaliation. The silence that had before surrounded Marina had given way to a simmering defiance, a warning that she was ready to fight back, suggesting that she was not one to go gently into the night. Our paths were meant to cross again not in the peaceful times of introspection, but in the midst of a public spectacle where every transgression would be exposed in a harsh light. The stakes were higher than ever, and I was ready to face whatever consequences lay ahead by holding on to the remnants of my determination like a warrior's shield as I prepared to enter this arena of unfiltered emotion and harsh realities. Ava and Logan, my children, watched with wide, unsure eyes amid all of this, torn between the ruins of their broken childhood and the ferocious resolve of a father pursuing justice. Although their silence hurt me, it also strengthened my resolve to fight for our family's future as well as for myself, because I could see the reflection of my own suffering in their faces. I realized that the fight I was about to undertake was as much against the demons of my past as it was against the treachery that had shaped my present as the nights grew longer and the rumors of retaliation started to reverberate through the hallways of our lives. Therefore, the first prepared myself for the day when Marina's facade would finally come to an end, a day when the truth would no longer be concealed in the shadows, but would shine forth like a beacon of vengeance and the promise of a new dawn with a heavy heart and an unwavering spirit. Stay tuned for Part 5, where the conflict between retribution and atonement reaches its climax, and the last reckoning turns the remains of our broken lives into the promise of a future that is uncertain but optimistic. With nothing but the unvarnished truth in my hands, I faced the scrutiny of the public as the last act came like a tidal wave, unrelenting and merciless. As I walked to the town hall, which had once been a symbol of community and shared optimism, it felt more like the stage where the tragic play of my life would come to a head. The day of reckoning began with a thick, oppressive sky that seemed to reflect the agony of my spirit. They had warned Marina. Every whispered exchange between the spectators served as a reminder that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of eking their way to the surface. Her eyes, hardened by the knowledge that her lies were being exposed, met mine across the packed room like two warriors preparing for the decisive battle. As the local journalist started to reveal the painstakingly compiled evidence, a compilation of images, sound recordings, and documents that unmistakably depicted treachery, deceit, and the disintegrating structure of our once sacred bond, I stood there, my heart thumping like the drumming of old war beats. The weight of every tear, every restless night, and every hushed promise of eternity that Marina's adultery had broken fell on me at that precise moment. I could feel the community's eyes on me. Some were sympathetic, some were silently critical, but in every one of them, I saw a reflection of my own brokenness and a tremendous will to regain the honor I had lost. A heavy and oppressive quiet descended upon the room, broken only by the shuffling of restless feet or the occasional repressed gasp, as Marina's facade, which had been meticulously built over 2 decades, began to shatter beneath the unrelenting assault of reality. Like a clarion call, the journalist's voice broke the stillness as he described every secret encounter and every lie, each syllable resonating the long-suppressed anguish of a man deceived. For the first time, I saw not the woman I had previously loved, but a stranger overwhelmed by the very distress she had once used as a shield, as I saw Marina's eyes flicker with terror and her carefully practiced lines dissolve into unintelligible mutterings. I did not find victory in exposing her wrongdoings in that last encounter, rather. I found the bittersweet relief that comes from realizing that the truth can no longer be concealed, and the hope that, despite the devastation, there may be a chance to rebuild a future based on honesty, no matter how flimsy it may be. I stepped up and spoke to the assembled crowd as the public show reached its climax, my voice quivering with the weight of everything I had been through. I said, my words echoing with the unadulterated emotion of a soul exposed. I stand before you not as a man defeated by betrayal, but as one who has learned that trust, once broken, may never be fully restored. But the courage to face that truth is the first step toward healing. I understood then that my desire for vengeance was never about destroying Marina, but rather about regaining my honor and creating a new course for the future that respected the past without allowing it to limit me. Moved by the seriousness of the disclosures, the community started to murmur in accord, a slow but steady rhythm of comprehension that spread through the gathering like wildfire. Even Ava and Logan, whose eyes had long served as windows into an agony they could barely fathom, appeared to find hope in what I said, a promise that, in spite of the broken remains of our family, there was yet hope for rebirth. I had let the bitter taste of betrayal control my life for far too long, but now that Marina's deceit was finally fading in the harsh light of reality, I made the decision to allow yesterday's wounds to become tomorrow's lessons. The town's collective spirit and the pieces of my broken heart gradually started to repair in the weeks after the public reckoning. Marina withdrew into a realm of regret and loneliness. Her once dominant presence diminished to faint echoes in our recollections' hallways. I also set out on a route of atonement, one that was paved with difficult steps like forgiving myself and reestablishing trust not in other people, but in myself. Every day turned into a silent protest against the hurt of the past, a tiny, purposeful step toward a time when the wounds of betrayal would not define me, but rather serve as a reminder of the fortitude required to overcome them. Through lengthy walks under the stars, meaningful chats by the fire, and quiet moments of understanding that helped me bridge the gap between grief and hope, I was able to reconnect with my kids in ways that went beyond the routine interactions of everyday life. Together, we started piecing together the pieces of our broken lives to create a new tapestry, each one demonstrating our tenacity and refusal to let the past's betrayals define us. I found comfort in writing the process of transforming my suffering into words that could one day operate as a lighthouse for those who had experienced comparable storms in the solitude of my study, surrounded by the artifacts of my academic achievements and the remains of a once cherished love. I wrote about the never-ending search for the truth, the sting of betrayal, and the difficult path to forgiveness not only of Marina, but also of myself, for having loved so profoundly and trusted so fully. The wounds that had previously bled so freely started to disappear as the seasons changed, giving way to the faint scars of a life led with bravery and honesty. I discovered that redemption was a process rather than an event, consisting of a number of minor, frequently unpleasant actions that, when combined, could result in the rediscovery of one's actual self. The vengeful fire that had previously consumed me eventually turned into a soft, enduring glow, serving as a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, the act of truth itself can ignite hope. As I stood on the precipice of a future full of both possibilities and uncertainty, I accepted the fact that I had weathered the storm and that a fresh start might arise from the ruins of a broken family. I therefore stepped forward into the light of a new dawn, one in which the lessons learned from the past would guide me but not confine me, where every echoed sorrow and every whispered regret would be turned into the strength to create a life of unwavering integrity and hard-won hope, with a heart tempered by pain and a spirit unbroken by the tides of betrayal. This concludes my story. My listeners, a tale of betrayal exposed, of love lost, and, in the end, of the unbreakable desire to rise again. I hope this story serves as a reminder that the germ of redemption may grow even in the deepest wounds, just waiting for the light of truth to help it bloom again.